The day Amaka said yes to Charles was the day her mother wept, not from joy but from fear. "Money is not a heart, my daughter," Mama had whispered as she touched Amaka's cheeks. "It won't love you when the nights grow cold." But Amaka didn't listen. How could she, when Charles had proposed with a diamond that looked like something from a music video? His car was sleek, his accent polished. He had businesses across Lagos, and his house in Lekki Phase 1 had marble floors so clean they reflected the chandelier like water. People talk. Amaka has made it. She's a queen now. Her children will be born into money. But no one remembered Richard. Not even Amaka, at least she tried not to. He was the boy who once fixed her father's generator, the one who brought her roasted corn during strikes, who taught her how to stretch rice when there was barely enough. He had dreams then, big ones. "I'll own a company one day," he used to say, laughing. "One that employs people like me who didn't go to fancy schools." But dreams didn't pay rent. So Amaka chose Charles. Her wedding was loud, expensive, and cold. She wore gold. Guests flew in from abroad. But even on the dance floor, with her glittering gown and imported makeup, her smile felt borrowed. Charles, her husband, was charming in public and distant in private. He took calls at dinner, traveled for weeks. And when he was home, he only spoke about profits, losses, and what she wasn't doing right. One night, as Amaka folded clothes in their oversized walk-in closet, her phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. She glanced casually, until she saw the headline. "Meet Africa's youngest billionaire. Richard Obi launches $200 million tech investment across West Africa." Her heart dropped. She gasped. The man she left in the dust had returned as a storm. Amaka stared at the screen like it had slapped her. There he was, Richard. But not the boy from her past. This Richard wore a crisp black suit, his beard neatly trimmed, his voice steady and smooth like the sound of rainfall at night. Behind him stood a wall of reporters and a screen that flashed numbers and company logos. One of those logos made her sit down. City Holdings acquires controlling interest in Zenith Core Group. Jennifer, Charles's company. She blinked. Opened the article. Read the sentence again. Richard didn't just make it. He was now the majority investor in her husband's company. Her hands trembled. Charles had returned from Abuja just that morning. He hadn't said a word about it. Only that a new partner was coming on board, and that he was too busy to explain business to someone who didn't understand numbers. But Richard, how? She remembered when he couldn't afford a smartphone, when he sold phone pouches in Yaba Market, when he asked her to wait. "Just give me 3 years, Amaka. I promise I'll become something." And she had laughed. Hope doesn't buy airtime, Richard. Now the same Richard was buying companies. Big ones. She scrolled further. Her chest tightened. That night she barely slept. Charles returned late as always. He walked past her without a word. But just as he reached for the remote, she whispered, "Did you know your new investor is Richard Obi?" He froze, slowly turned. His face shifted just a flicker, but it was enough. He knew. And for the first time since their wedding, Charles looked afraid. Charles didn't speak. He stood there, hand hovering over the remote, as if the name Richard had turned his living room into ice. His brows drew together, not in confusion, but in calculation. "Where did you hear that?" he asked, voice low. "It was on the news," Amaka replied, watching him closely. "You didn't think I'd see it." He dropped the remote on the couch and poured himself a drink. "It's just business. Investors come and go. You wouldn't understand." She flinched. There it was again, you wouldn't understand. The way he always reduced her. Like her thoughts were too small for his world of suits and deals. "But you knew who he was," she said softly. Charles took a sip of his drink and looked away. "It doesn't matter." That silence between them stretched long and heavy. Amaka felt something shift. Something beyond business. Richard hadn't just bought into Charles's company. This was personal. The next morning, Charles left earlier than usual. No goodbye. No breakfast. Just the sound of his tires on the driveway as the gate slid open. Amaka sat alone at the dining table, untouched food in front of her. She stared out the window, heart pounding. Richard had returned with power. But what did he want? Revenge? Redemption? Or something deeper? She remembered his words back then. One day, they'll say your name and mine in the same sentence, but for different reasons. She had laughed then. But she wasn't laughing now. She picked up her phone, searched Richard Obi contact, and scrolled until she found a public relations email. She hesitated, then typed, "Congratulations on your success. I would like to speak with you. Amaka." No expectations, no begging, just a door left open. And less than an hour later, her phone rang. Caller ID, private number. Amaka stared at the screen. The phone vibrated gently in her hand, as if waiting for her to be brave. She pressed answer. "Hello." Silence. Then came a voice. Deep, calm, older now but still familiar. A voice that once read love letters beside kerosene lamps. "Amaka." She swallowed hard. "Richard." "Yes. I saw your message." His tone was flat. Not cold but distant. Like someone who had learned not to feel too much. "I didn't expect you to reply so quickly," she said, trying to sound calm. "I don't waste time anymore." Another pause. "I heard you're now an investor," she said carefully. "I am. In my husband's company." "I know." The room felt too quiet. Even the ticking clock seemed to wait. "Why Zenith Core?" she asked. "Out of all the companies you could have chosen." Richard chuckled, but there was no joy in it. "You think this is about you?" She blinked. "Isn't it?" "No, Amaka. This is about power. It's about choices." He paused. "I gave everything I had to a dream. You gave up on it. That's not my fault." His words stung more than she expected. But still, she didn't hang up. "I was scared," she said softly. "You were struggling. I didn't want to live in suffering all my life." "I was building," he said. "You didn't see the difference." Her throat tightened. "I'm not calling to fight," she whispered. I wanted to see you again. Maybe talk. Maybe apologize." Silence again. Then, "Tomorrow, noon, Ocean View Hotel. Don't be late." And just like that he ended the call. Amaka stared at her reflection in the black screen. Her heart knocking against her ribs. She had buried Richard in her past. Now, she was about to face the man he had become. Ocean View Hotel was quiet that afternoon. The kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat feel loud. Amaka wore a simple cream blouse and dark jeans. Not her usual designer wear. She didn't want to look like Charles's wife. She wanted to be Amaka again. The girl who once waited at the junction with N100 for Suya. The girl who once believed in dreams, even if they scared her. She walked into the lounge and saw him almost immediately. Richard sat by the window. He wasn't flashy. Just a navy blue shirt, no tie, no loud watch. Yet everyone noticed him. He had presence now. Like a man who had walked through fire and come out dressed in calm. He looked up, eyes locking with hers. He didn't smile. "Sit." She obeyed. For a few seconds they just stared at each other. "You look different," she said finally. "You look the same," he replied. "Except now you wear your silence like jewelry." She flinched but didn't respond. He poured a glass of water and pushed it toward her. "So why are you really here, Amaka?" "I don't know," she said truthfully. "Maybe I wanted to understand. Maybe I wanted to ask if you hate me." He leaned back. "Hate takes energy. I don't waste mine anymore." She looked down, twisting the napkin in her hands. "When I left you, I thought I was choosing stability, safety. And did you get it?" he asked. She looked up, tears forming. "No." He nodded slowly, as if he already knew. "I gave Charles an offer yesterday," he said. "One that could save his company or destroy it. It depends on how he behaves." He gasped. "You want revenge?" No, Richard said quietly. I want clarity. He leaned closer, eyes sharp. Do you love him, Amaka? The question hit harder than any insult. She opened her mouth, closed it. Richard sat back, watching her struggle. And then he whispered, if you don't know the answer, then maybe this isn't about him. Amaka drove home in silence, Richard's words echoing in her head. If you don't know the answer, then maybe this isn't about him. She thought of Charles, the man she married. The man who gifted her a mansion but not a home. A man who had money in his hands but none in his eyes. Was it love she felt? Or just fear of losing status? When she got home, Charles was in the study, pacing. His phone to his ear, his voice low and sharp. He hung up quickly when he saw her. Where were you? He asked, irritation coating his words. She dropped her bag gently. I met Richard. His face darkened. You did what? I needed answers. Charles laughed dryly. Answers? About what? He's playing games, Amaka. He thinks money makes him important. No, she said, voice rising. Money didn't make him important. He became important because no one believed in him, including me. Charles's eyes narrowed. So now you regret marrying me? I regret not knowing who I married, she shot back. He stepped closer, anger simmering. That man is trying to ruin me. He wants to take everything I built. She looked him dead in the eye. And maybe he will. But tell me the truth, Charles. Are you even building anything real? That question silenced him. 'Cause he knew. The truth was, Charles's empire was already crumbling. There were whispers of debt, silent layoffs, shady contracts. Richard hadn't come to destroy anything. He had come to reveal what was already falling apart. Charles sat down slowly, face pale. He gave me 2 days to decide. Sell my shares or step down. If I don't, he'll buy the rest of the board and kick me out. And what will you do? She asked. I don't know. For the first time, Charles looked small. Not rich. Not powerful. Just lost. And in that moment, Amaka saw everything clearly. She had married a man chasing money, while the man she left had become it. The house was too quiet that evening. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Amaka sat in the garden, where the flowers no longer bloomed as they used to. Maybe they too were tired of pretending. She watched the sky turn orange, her thoughts louder than ever. Charles had gone upstairs, locking himself in his office. He hadn't spoken since their argument. Maybe he was thinking. Maybe he was crumbling. She didn't know. She didn't care, not like she used to. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Richard. My offer expires tomorrow. I won't push again. You deserve to choose your own peace. She read it twice. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a plea. It was something deeper. Respect. Something she hadn't tasted in a long time. Suddenly, memories flooded in. Richard helping her mother fetch water after her surgery. Richard holding her close when her father died. Richard giving her the last piece of boiled yam during that long ASUU strike. He was always rich. Just not in money. But now he had both. And her. She had a man who built walls instead of bridges. Who couldn't say sorry even when drowning. The door creaked. Charles walked out slowly. He looked tired. I'm selling, he said, sitting beside her. I have no choice. She nodded. Then he turned to her. Will you still be here when it's all gone? Amaka's chest tightened. She had spent years protecting his image, wearing a mask in public, hiding her sadness in selfies and soft smiles. Now, for the first time, she didn't have to lie. I don't know, she said softly. I stayed for security. But now I see I've never been safe. Charles didn't respond. He didn't beg. He just looked away. Because deep down he knew. She had already left. Her heart just hadn't packed yet. Morning light crept through the curtains, painting golden stripes on the floor. Amaka stood by the window, suitcase beside her. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't running. She was finally ready. Charles sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped. He hadn't said a word since she woke. Maybe he knew nothing he said would matter anymore. "Where will you go?" he asked, not looking up. She zipped her bag calmly. "Somewhere I can breathe." He nodded slowly. "Will you be with him?" He paused. "I don't know. But I'll be with myself." "That's a start." It wasn't anger in her voice. It was clarity. She left quietly without drama. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just a woman walking away from a story that no longer served her. At the hotel lobby, Richard was waiting. He stood when he saw her, unsure of what she'd say. There were no flowers, no speeches. Just two people who had once loved and maybe still could. She smiled, small but real. "I'm not here to chase the past," she said. "I'm here to choose better." Richard nodded. "And I won't ask you for anything but peace." They sat in silence, sipping tea as the city came alive outside. No labels, no promises, just a quiet beginning. Later she would rebuild, not with someone else's name but with her own. She would start a foundation for women who married wealth but lost themselves. She would share her story not as gossip, but as a lesson. Because sometimes the richest thing a woman can own is her choice. And Amaka, she chose to stop surviving and start living. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more powerful tales rooted in African soul and spirit. What would you have done if you were Amaka? Drop your thoughts in the comment section and remember, the richest thing we can own is our own choice.